Women with the will have the ability. And tonight, Ashley Hall is proud to partner with the Center for Women and the League of Women Voters to host a stage specifically for women with the will. For 100 years, Ashley Hall's mission has been to produce educated, independent, ethically responsible women who are prepared to meet the challenges of the communities in which they live. This commitment to our mission is continually manifest by our graduates who work in civic service at all levels in their communities, their states, and our nation. Graduates like Barbara Pierce Bush, Crandall Close Bowles, Dr. Sue Levkoff, Martha Rivers Ingram, and of course, our moderator tonight, Janet Robinson Alterman. Janet serves as the executive director of the Center for Women and has shared her knowledge, expertise, and resources with Ashley Hall in many ways, most recently as chair of our Centennial Women with the Will lecture series. For this, we are extremely grateful. Her dedication to the women of this community and the development and advancement of their power is inspiring, and we are so proud to collaborate with her on this and so many of her other endeavors. I'm pleased to introduce Janet Robinson Alterman.
Good evening, and thank you, Jill. Judith, am I working? I've never had one of these on. I have to tell you, I stand up on this stage and I revert right back to 9th grade. I'm waiting for someone, you got it? I'm waiting for someone to call out my name as having an overdue library book. I want to welcome everyone to this wonderful celebration of Women's Equality Day, which is co-sponsored by the Center, Ashley Hall, and the League of Women Voters. Tonight is not about politics. Tonight is about women who have made history. Now, tomorrow marks the 91st anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. And tonight, I want all of us to recognize those thousands, and I mean thousands of women, the suffragettes who spent over 100 years trying to win that right for us. I think it's only appropriate to recognize that the founder of Ashley Hall, Miss Mary Vardreen Mackbee, who founded this school in 1909, 11 years before women got the right to vote, was a suffragette herself and very active in this community. There was also another Charlestonian that we need to remember, and her name was Anita Politzer. And Anita was a lobbyist for the National Women's Party. She worked hand in hand with Alice Paul, the great suffragette. And in 1918, when Congress finally passed the amendment giving us the right to vote, it was Anita Politzer that went state by state to lobby those legislatures to ratify that amendment. Literally 91 years ago tonight, Anita Politzer was in Tennessee and having dinner with a representative by the name of Harry Burns. And the next day, the Tennessee state legislature was due to vote on whether or not to ratify the 19th Amendment. Now, at this point, 35 other states had done it. So this was that crucial moment. Anita went and had dinner with Harry Burns, and she gave him all the arguments as to why women should have the right to vote, okay? All the moral arguments, the economic, everything. He wouldn't budge. So the next day, the legislature convenes, and picture it as, say, 40 white men, which is what they were in 1920, and all 40 of them walk into this chamber, and 20 of them who are opposed go over here, and the other 20 who are in favor, because we've got a split vote here, okay? We've got an even vote. We need one swing candidate. And Anita thought everything was lost until a Western Union messenger boy came into that chamber, girls, and handed Harry a telegram. And Harry opened that telegram, and he's over here with the ones who are opposed to giving us the right to vote. He opened that telegram, and he read it, and he closed it, and he got up, and he walked to the other side of the room. And Harry Burns gave us the right to vote. The telegram was from Harry's mother. Anita Politzer went to see Harry's mother. So thank you, Anita. And if Many years later, another Charleston woman and another Ashley Hall alum by the name of Nancy Stevenson made history by being the first woman elected to statewide office when she became Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina in 1978. I had the great privilege of working for her. And tonight, we have another history-making woman in our midst, Governor Nikki Haley, the first, and we hope not the last, woman governor. She will be sharing her thoughts on the state of the state, and then we're going to have an informal discussion about her rise to prominence and the challenges she faces as a woman in elected office. Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the great state of South Carolina, Nikki Haley.
Well, first of all, it is a pleasure to be here. I see that we have some guy friends in the room, but there is nothing I love more than to get in a room with a group of girlfriends. So thank you for letting me do this today. I love the fact that tomorrow we are celebrating the anniversary of the 19th Amendment. How many of you have seen the movie Iron-Jawed Angels? The rest of you have to see it. It's got Hilary Swank in it. It's a cool movie. But it tells you the story of Alice Paul, and it gives you exactly what happened and what they went through and the fight. And when you see that movie, you will never, ever again take for granted the right to vote. It is an absolutely amazing and stunning movie. I plan on, my daughter just turned 13, and I plan on her watching it this year, but you really should. Don't just watch it, but spread the word of that movie. It's good for men, it's good for women, but it's something that you definitely should take the time to watch. You know, I know that we could talk about some policy here, but I want to kind of talk about something else, because this is about the leadership of women, and this is about where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. And the one thing I can tell you that I love about women is that they're very strong. They don't always know it, but the will that we have is so impressive. And what helps us go through life is when we develop war stories. And war stories are what molds us. War stories are what gives us our courage. War stories are what defines us in the end. And we all have them. So I'm going to ask you at the end about your war stories, but I'm going to tell you about a few of mine. Mine started, I grew up in a small town in Bamberg. We were the only Indian family in that small town of Bamberg. And so we grew up understanding that what makes you different makes you special, or that's always what my mom told us. And so went through that, graduated with a degree in accounting from Clemson, and I went on to get my first job. I was the first female executive of a company in Charlotte. They had never had a female executive before, and I was going in as an accounting supervisor, and walked in and was kind of green and all excited about my first new job, and we had our first board meeting. Walked into the board meeting, and the CEO was late, and so all of the other executives were there, and all of a sudden the CEO comes running in, and the CFO looks and says, makes a joke about him being late, and then he says, "Paul, you want some coffee?" And he said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And he said, "Nikki, get Paul a cup of coffee." Now, I knew then that how I handled that situation would define what my working relationship was going to be from there on out. And without even a second thought, I leaned over to the phone by my side, and I called my secretary. And I said, "Alice, would you please get Paul a cup of coffee?" And the look on their face was just blank. They got it. They understood that they had done something that was not appropriate. So sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what you do, it's how you do it that makes a difference. And so I didn't have to kick and scream. I didn't have to say, "Oh, I can't believe you did that." Just with the subtle thought of, I'll go show them what they should have done instead, fix the problem, and I never had another issue with any of those men at that company. And so that's why I will always tell you that keep in mind that you have to go forward with grace. A second war story is when I got into the legislature. You always see things and you say, "Well, I need to fix it." Well, what we saw over and over again was a lot of bills were crossing the desk, and no one was really paying attention to what was happening, and things were passing the desk, and people would say, "All in favor, say aye," and all opposed, say nay. The ayes have it, and they never thought about how much these bills were costing or what these bills were doing. And all of a sudden, there was a bill that crossed the desk that gave legislators pay increases. Not uncommon, you will see that happen. But in a split second, it was right across the desk, And they passed it overwhelmingly, and to this day you cannot find one legislator that says they voted themselves a pay raise. I got very upset, and I went to my leadership and I said, we have to do something about this. We have to gain the trust of the public. We should be showing all of these votes on the record. Every name should be with every vote. And the leadership said, put the bill away. We don't need to have it. We will decide what the public needs to see and what they don't. Now, in a situation in a legislature where we are lowest in the country on women elected officials, it is also a time where you realize if you're going to do anything in your life, make sure people remember you for it. Make sure that you've made a difference. Make sure that people are better off because you were there. I started off my situation in the legislature. The first year I was chairman of the freshman class. The second year I was named majority whip. The third year I was chairman of banking subcommittee, and then I was also majority whip. And what ended up happening is, as soon as I went and pushed for this bill to become law, they stripped me of everything. Now, while they were trying to prove to my colleagues, this is what we do to someone that steps out of line, I was trying to prove to my colleagues, this is what happens when we step out of line. I was still strong, I was still standing, and I was very aware of who I worked for. It took us a few years, and it was a lot of bruises, but now the very first thing we did when I became governor is now every single vote is on the record for everybody to see, including every section of the budget. Having the courage to fight for something when everybody else is against you is what really makes us who we are. We've got to make sure that we continue to fight through the courage. We've got to continue to show grace under pressure when we go through that. And then recently, through this governor's campaign, I've got a whole set of war stories there, but during the governor's race, I had to go to D.C., and there was this strategist, this political strategist that everybody said was a rock star, and he had been known within the political world, and he kind of decided who would win and who wouldn't win in races. And they told me it was a big deal. Well, when I sat down with him, he was pretty demeaning. He was... And I understood that I was fourth in the race of four. I was running against an attorney general, a lieutenant governor, and a congressman. And here was this girl who thought she could win in South Carolina as governor. But then he turned around and he asked a question. He said, how do the people in South Carolina see you? Black, white, or other? Now, I was very offended by what he said. And it was also a sign of he didn't think I could win. And that was okay. But rather than pitch a fit and say something to him there, I just won. So now he can't say it anymore. But you know, the thing is, all of these stories that have led up to this have made me who I am. And my question to you is, when you go home tonight, I want you to think about what are your 3 war stories. If you have 3, then keep on doing it. You're doing great things. If you don't have 3, you've got a lot of living to do. And you've got to find out exactly where you're going to go. And so I tell you that because I think it's very important that in a time where we're watching women rise up in the ranks, at the end of the day, it only comes down to us. We have to do this. There is nothing holding us back except for ourselves. And I will tell you that women, I'm a huge fan of women, but we second guess ourselves all the time. And we always try and talk ourselves out of doing things. And the best thing you can ever do when you get scared is to push through it and work through it. And make sure that whatever you do, be great at it and make sure that people remember you for it. So thank you for your time. And I know we've got some Q&A, and so we'll start there, if that sounds good.
I've got about 1,000 war stories. Okay, I'll write them all down one day. But I have to say this, the leadership skills that I have developed began right here on this campus, and that's what Ashley Hall instills in young women every day. And you're going to remember this. All of you are going to remember this night 25 years from now. You mentioned that you grew up in Bamberg. I have to ask this question. You know, your family immigrated to the U.S. from India, left behind, I'm sure, vast possibilities. But how did you deal with the cultural differences that you faced, being from literally another culture as a child?
You know, it was difficult, and it was difficult because we were noticeably different. My father wore a turban, and so, you know, there was nobody else, so they didn't know what to think of him. And then, you know, I was one of 4 kids, and so it was hard for all of us. But the one thing my parents always said is, don't worry about the differences. Remind people how you're similar. And so that was really how we dealt with it. There was a time when we were on the kickball field, and that was the thing we did in 3rd grade, and we would all run around and play kickball, and I remember all of a sudden I went up one day and there were two groups, and one was a group of black girls and one was a group of white girls, and they stood, and I was standing in the middle, and they said, we're not going to play, because I said, are we going to play? And they said, no, we're not going to play until you pick one. And I said, pick what? And they said, you have to pick a side. Which one are you? Are you black or are you white? And I said, I'm brown. And they said, no, you have to pick. And I went and I grabbed the kickball and I ran. And then they started running after me, and before you knew it, we were all playing kickball again. And it was survival mode. It was really just trying to find out how to get people to get back on what I wanted to talk about or get back on what I wanted to do. And I think that that's true for any challenges we go through. You go and try and get people to think about what really matters in the end and get away from all those other things.
I'm curious, did you get involved in student government?
I did not. I was not in any sort of high school government, college government. I mean, I was never one of those kids. I wasn't. It just wasn't something I was going to do. What got me involved in government was when I actually started doing the accounting for the corporation, and then when I came home to the family business and seeing how hard it was to make a dollar and how easy it was for government to take it. And my mother always said, don't complain about it, do something about it. So I decided to run for the State House.
What about team sports?
I was a tennis player.
Good response. So accounting, I have to tell you, I didn't spend many nights in high school dreaming of accounting major in college. I had a tough enough time with math. But what made you choose accounting?
My parents had a business, and they believed in keeping the kids close to them. So we all worked in the business, and we would dust shelves, and we would do whatever it took. And I was just bored. It was a women's clothing store, and so I wasn't into the merchandising like my sister was, or the displays and all of that. And so I was walking around, and I was a kid that kind of twirled my hair and was bored. And we had a bookkeeper, and she was leaving, and she told my mom, she said, I need to know who you're going to hire so I can train them. Mm-hmm. And I was 13 years old, and my mom grabbed my elbow, and she said, I want you to train her. And she said, Rod, she said, I can't train her. She's 13. She said, if you teach her, she will do it. And at 13 years old, I started doing sales taxes, ledgers. I went through my first audit at 16. It wasn't until I got to Clemson that I realized that wasn't normal. But, it really was something that I just fell in love with numbers. I love that numbers tell a story. Mm-hmm. And from then on, accounting was just a love of mine.
Listen to that. Take at least an accounting course, okay?
Yes.
I wish I had. You mentioned your first job. I'm curious, after that first job, you went and joined your family business,
Yes.
right? What was it like working in a family business? What were the challenges of that?
We have a very close family, and in a family business, the one thing is it can be the most rewarding experience because you fight together, you win together, you go through all these things, but you also have to have your certain spots. And so the best thing about the family business is I did the accounting, my sister did the merchandising, my brother did the men's department, my mom and dad watched over all of us, so we all had our own separate unit that we were in charge of, and it worked great. It was a great experience.
Well, you've been active in the chambers of commerce in both Lexington and Orangeburg County, and I understand you're a past president of the South Carolina chapter of NABO, the National Association of Women Business Owners. Do you think women in business, and particularly women business owners, face different challenges than men?
I don't think so. I think businesses face challenges, period. It's tough right now. And I think that the one thing that we're all trying to do is make sure that our businesses can get through this economy in a way that they don't struggle so much. So I don't really see a difference for men versus women. It's funny, the only difference I ever saw was it takes longer for women to make that jump and say, I'm going to start a business or to do something. Men are quick to make that decision, and women kind of second guess it a couple of times.
Or are particularly cautious.
Very cautious.
I think we see a lot of the Center for Women. We do a lot of programs to help women start businesses, and I'll tell you one of the things I hear a lot of is access to capital. Mm-hmm. Of course, right now the banks aren't lending to anybody, much less somebody who's, say, leaving a job and starting an entrepreneurial venture. But what made you run that first time? What motivated you to run for office?
For the State House?
Mm-hmm.
Ignorance is bliss. I did not know you weren't supposed to run against a 30-year incumbent in a primary. I truly didn't. My mom told me I could do anything, and I believed her. And so when I decided to run for the State House, once I got in and realized that he had been in there 30 years and he was related to half the district, it was too late to get out. So the only option was to win.
Did you decide that on your own, or did someone come and suggest it to you? I mean, were you drafted?
I was frustrated with government and business. And so in NABO, where I was a part, there were all these women businesses, and so we would talk about the different frustrations that we had. And there was one woman, her name is Eleanor Kitzman. She was our director of insurance, and she worked for me on the Budget Control Board. Now she's director of insurance in Texas. She and I started talking about the fact that, we need more business people in the legislature. And the more we talked about it, and I said, I've thought about that. I don't even know where to start. And she said, well, you should do it. You absolutely should do it. And so I talked to my husband. My husband was extremely supportive. My parents were supportive. And that was it.
Wow. You mentioned earlier that we're 50th in the nation in terms of women in our legislature. And of course, you have made history as governor. But that still doesn't make up for the fact that there are no women in the state Senate. There are, 15, 16 in the state House. Why do you think more women don't run?
We are lowest in the country because women don't run. Let's be clear. It's not harder for a woman. It's different for a woman. It's not harder. But it's simply because women don't run. And I think it's because they look and see what happens in these races and what happens in mine. And they get nervous from the fact that they don't think they can do it all. And I will tell you that the number one thing that I was told when I decided to run for the State House was, you can't do that. You have small children. Well, my mom will tell you, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it just to prove that it can be done. And, you can do it. It's no different than having a business or teaching or anything else. We balance. Women balance beautifully. And we have a way of prioritizing and making sure that nothing falls. And so, it can be done. And what I try and tell people is there is no requirement to run for office. You have to care, you have to want to help people, and you have to be willing to work. And that's all it is. And if you get in there and you do that, you can make a difference. And after I won my race, what I loved was we had so many people come in and say, I love that you did that, and we're so glad you did that. But after seeing what you went through, I'd never run for office. And that was the total opposite of what I wanted. Because what I wanted people to see is we can do it. And it is just a matter of just saying, I'm going to do it, and do whatever it takes until you win.
Let's talk about other pathways to power that women might be able to take. There's a lot of research out there that shows that having at least 3 women on a governing board or commission helps enormously in integrating diverse viewpoints. And in the business world, they're showing that corporate boards that have at least 3 women, that those companies show a higher profitability than those without a gender mix. And I know this has come up before with regard to your appointments, but I'm curious, what are your views on gender diversity on governing boards?
I think women are incredibly strong on boards, period. But what you have to look for when you're appointing people to a board are experiences. You have to look at what they can bring to the table. You don't look whether it's a man or a woman or whether they're black or white. You look at the best person that you can put on there. And I know that we are constantly looking for women. We are constantly looking for minorities. We are constantly looking for all types of people. What we need is for them to step up and say, I want to serve. That's the hardest part. Just like we don't see the women running for office, we don't see women stepping up to really serve on boards and things like that. And I think that women tend to sit back and wait for someone to ask them to do something. And what I need women to do is to step up and say, I want to do this. How do I get there?
I do want to bring up the South Carolina GAP project, the gubernatorial appointment project. And I do know that I think it's the Southeastern Institute for Women in Politics, did compile literally a notebook of resumes of women who were interested in being appointed to boards and commissions.
Yes.
And I'm hoping you're tapping into that.
Yes, we did. And we had other women step up, too.
Good.
We had to actually go out and search for quite a few. But I will tell all of you, if any of you want to serve on a board or commission, there are more than enough spaces for us to fill for all kinds of things, and we'd love for you to step up.
In this economy, pay has become an especially sensitive subject, particularly with unemployment being so high. But I think for women, pay equity is a big issue regardless of the economy. Nationally, women are making 80 cents for every dollar a man makes in a comparable job. And in South Carolina, for white women, it's 74 cents. For African American women, it's 65. For Latina women, it's even less. What can we do to educate employers about the benefits of paying a woman what she's worth?
The best people that can do that are those that work in those companies. Is when you go and you do a good job, when you go and really prove yourself. If you know you're getting paid less, go in there and ask for more. Go and say, this is what I've done for you. This is why I need more. And do it with confidence and do it with pride. That's the one thing we don't see enough of is We see women talk about how the pay is lower. What we need is those women that are in those positions, they need to fight. Because once you go and show, and I did that with that company in Charlotte that I worked for, once they got used to a female executive and they saw the work I did and they saw what I did, I also asked for more. I said, look, I've done this. I need to continue to move through the ranks as well. And when you ask for it, they do reward you for it. But you have to fight when you get in there. And I'm hoping if we get enough women that fight within our companies, it will start to become the norm.
Did you negotiate for that
Always.
salary, but for the very first
Yes.
salary? You did?
Yes, and they did not pay me what they would have paid someone else.
And how were you able to determine what you should have been paid?
Well, you always assume that you should get paid the highest. I would tell everybody that. But what they did was they looked at experience, and I think they looked at the fact that they had not dealt with a female executive before. When I got in there, then I went in there, and once I showed them what I did, I asked for it again, and they gave it to me.
I'm going to ask about the South Carolina State Compensation Plan, because I worked for the Budget and Control Board 1,000 years ago.
God bless you.
Yeah, I know. We won't go there. But I know at the time we were very aware in the State Personnel Division of making sure that state salaries were commensurate, with what the market could bear. But I also am wondering, that compensation plan has not been reviewed since 1995. And I guess I'm asking whether or not that's something that could be addressed in the near
Absolutely.
future, to look at where we are with state salaries as it works in the marketplace, but also assuring that we don't have gender discrimination.
No, and I think that's a great idea, and I think that any women that are in leadership roles, we need to take those opportunities. I think it's something that we need to, and the only way we're going to see women strengthen is when other women lift you up. That it's just, I'm a firm believer, and if any of you decided to run for office, I would tell you to call me, because if I could save you 2 steps, I want to do that. And whether it's in business or whether it's in education or whether it's running for office, we should always try and figure out how we can lift women up, how we can support them through the process. When you were talking about women running for office, we need women to say, you can do this. I know you can do it. I know you'll be great at it. What do you need? How can I help you? We have to step up and do that little push.
Well, as Madeleine Albright said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women.
That's exactly right.
I know we're all excited about Boeing, and we've been excited about BMW for years in terms of economic development. We're trying to raise tax revenue and create jobs. But do you think there is room to have on a parallel track this emphasis on getting manufacturing in some of the the big box companies, and at the same time really supporting the growth and sustainability of small and micro businesses?
Yes, absolutely. And the way we do that is, we want these big companies to come in. It's great for our economy, but what makes it great is when they understand that they need to hire our South Carolina businesses to do their work. And so when I talk to companies that are coming into South Carolina, that's always something I ask them is, how many contracts are you doing with South Carolina businesses? And Boeing is a great example, because when I sat down with their executives and said, how many of your contracts are you doing with South Carolina businesses? They said 91%. That's phenomenal. That's what helps small businesses, is when we know that they're not going out of state to fill those needs, they're actually using the small businesses in state.
One of the things that the center has piloted in the last couple of years is a microloan program. Microloans are hugely successful in most third world countries,
Yes.
but unfortunately we don't have that kind of system here. Would you support something like that, a microloan program? And I'm talking micro in terms of $1,000 to $5,000 loans.
Yes,
through
absolutely.
the Department of Commerce or some state agency.
Yes, absolutely, especially during this time where the banks are seeing the risk and they're really not wanting to give, and they're pulling credit lines instead of lending. I think we're almost going to have to go that route.
So you're right smack dab in the good old boy network.
That's what
It
they're
still
doing.
exists, right?
It does, yes.
So, what advice do you give the rest of us? How do we work in a state that still tends to look down upon us?
Stop saying that we work in a state that looks down upon us. I say that, and I mean that with great respect, in that, we have come a long way. This state just elected a female minority governor, and that says a lot about the people of this state. That says a lot about where we have come as a state, and I want people to be proud. I want them to look at South Carolina, and I want them to talk great about it. I believe that we live in the best state in the country. I strongly believe that. And I want people across the state to start talking about what a great state it is, because you never know when you're standing in line and you're saying something about the state, and you might be standing next to a CEO who's looking to put a company here. or someone who's looking at buying a second home. We need to be positive. We need to make sure that we understand that. And I work every day on changing the perception of our state. I work every day on showing how great the people are, how great the businesses are, how pro-business we are, where we're going in different aspects. And that's what I hope we'll do. Is the Good Old Boy Network there? Yes. But the best way to get past it is to ignore it and keep focused and keep working. And that's what I keep
That's really
trying to do.
worked for you. That's a good mantra for you, isn't it?
It is.
You know, keep the eye on the ball, as it were, and keep pushing forward.
You have to tune out the noise. You have to, those will always be distractions. And if you just tune out the noise, then you can keep on pushing through.
I just happened to be in my kitchen, not that I'm there that often, but I happened to be in my kitchen last week in Wolf Blitzer's Situation Room, and there you were. And he asked you point blank, or would you consider being a vice presidential candidate? Would you share with us what you said then?
No. I said, I love being the governor of South Carolina. I want to continue being the governor of South Carolina. And what I hope that we realize in our country is that we deserve better than someone who's just served his 8 months as governor. We should be looking at someone that's got a lot more experience and someone who is ready for that national stage. And I made a promise to the people of the state. And that is what I'm going to hold to, is to finish my promise that I made to the people of the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.